Okay, a couple quick stories. So, on standardized testing in high school, when it came to area mechanical aptitude, I think I've shared with you, I tested out at the 8th percentile. That means there are 92% of all American high school students that are a lot sharper when it comes to mechanical aptitude than I am. That does not mean that you can't have power tools, however. But 2 or 3 Christmases ago, Cade, my oldest grandson, asked, "Hey, Geet, would you build me this really cool bunk bed set?" And I did. And I get about halfway through the day, say 3 o'clock, and I get pretty fuzzy-headed. And when I do, I don't necessarily have all the clarity, but I knew I needed to finish this thing up so I could take it apart, stack it in the trailer, take it down, and set it up. So the bunk bed's painted dark brown, and I labeled all of the parts with a nice lead pencil. Right. So I take it apart, not thinking. We take it down there, try to set it up. The marks are nowhere to be found, right? So I told you last week that part of what I did, I got up early and started sinking the fence post for Cade's little jungle gym, his little monkey bars. After service, went home, rested a little bit, went out, finished the job, set the post. Monday, I look at it, and on one side, or one end, they're 33 inches. On the other end, they're 37 inches. So again, not functioning too well, but I've got an angle on this one, right? In my bars, I'm going to use conduit, or no, actually galvanized piping. So I've got the holes pre-drilled, they line up, I run everything in, and then mark them all, and decide I'm not making the same mistake twice. I went and got my Sharpie, labeled each pipe to match each hole. Went in the barn, cut the pipes, went to stick them back in, and you know what I did, don't you? I cut the ends off that I had marked and identified the numbers on. And I was feeling so cocky for a while, like I mastered this. And then I started putting them in and went, dude, this is really funny. Now the point of those stories is this. Just because our aptitude is low in an area, doesn't mean we can't wrestle with it and have fun. We're going to talk about meaning, purpose, finding your X, finding your calling, if you will. And one of the keys is to find the joy in the process. And to find joy, we have to get comfortable with humility. In God's economy, it's never about humiliation. But I would imagine for some of us, if you stepped into my shoes with the craziness of the bunk bed, or the craziness of cutting the ends of the bars off that you had labeled, or my ultimate story was when we bought our property and I was clearing the trees and brush so we could build our house. I'm 20 foot up in a tree. I went all the way to the top, cutting it, knocking it down, taking it all the way down. I'm on the last major branch, and my bride comes up with her mother-in-law, or her mom, my mother-in-law, and she's trying to get my attention. And suddenly I feel like Robert Redford in Jeremiah Johnson, where it's like, woman, don't distract me, I'm working with a power tool. Now, at some point I hear, and I realize I'm cutting the branch off I'm standing on. And I came down 15, 20 feet, boom. My mother-in-law's looking at me like, Mom, this is how all the lumberjacks get out of trees. So, several years back, and now, I ate a lot of crow. When my wife and I were first married, she says to me, you seem to be accident prone. And I tell you, I was literally offended. However, there's not a day that goes by that I don't have blood running through me somewhere. Like 2 years ago when I came inside and there's blood running up the side of my head, she said, what did you do? I said, I tried to sit up underneath my truck after I finished changing the oil on it. It didn't move. It's those kinds of things. But can you laugh at yourself then? See, that's the key. Because here's another little secret. All these little kids in here, if you can't laugh at yourself, that's the energy you're passing to them. Don't expect that they're ever going to get a handle on accepting themselves if you can't. It's not your words, parents. It's the energy and the life that you hold within you. So several years back, Jackie and I and our oldest daughter, Becca, were in Italy. And they say, don't drive in Rome, right? I grew up in Minnesota. I can handle this, you know. So we're going to Rome from Vernonia, where we had our car towed the night before. And I asked Jackie, the navigator, we're looking for exit such and such. I forget what it was. So I said, tell me when you see that exit. So she's got the map. Now, when your navigator starts doing this with the map, that's not really a good sign, is it? We finally found our way to the center of the Rome, and I don't remember the hotel we're staying at, but we can't find it, and I'm asking her, get on the phone, talk to the concierge, we got to find this, and at one point, I think we drove around Rome for, what, 4 days, and you would come to one of these intersections where like 12 little roads all come together, so we go flying in there, and Jackie, for whatever reason, screams, turn left. I turn left. Lo and behold, I'm now on the trolley tracks. Cement sides on both sides. I look in the rearview mirror. I see a big white light. And we're screaming at each other, right? I'm on the trolley tracks! Becca's in the back just crying like my parents are nuts and I'm going to die. So, as it turns out, we bolt out of this little thing into another intersection. I yank it left for some reason. And Becca screams, there's our hotel! We pull up in front, and I'm like traumatized, you know? And the guy looks at me and he's like, I said, keep the car, do whatever you want with the car. The point of that story is this: God will never ask you to step into a place that your shape isn't created to do. Despite what I did to Jacqueline asking her to be a navigator, God's not going to do that to you. Hold on to that. Okay, let's go to the second slide. Finding your calling is discovering the life of the Spirit buried in the image of God that you were created from. More into that. You can't find your X. You can't get to meaning and purpose in life until you have first found you. You have to know who you are. You have to come to a deep sense of acceptance of who you are. You have to believe that the worth is on the inside and that you delight in being you. And if you don't delight in being you, typically it's because you're staring at the ugly side, the broken side of who you are, which, by the way, all of us have. And we have a choice. Like we talked about last week, where are you going to fix your eyes? We can fix our eyes on the brokenness of humanity, myself. We can live as victims. My life doesn't look the way I want it to look because of everybody and everything on the outside. Or we can begin to understand, no, worth is derived from the inside out. You with me? But if you say to yourself, you take that look in the mirror, other than Doug, because Doug has more than enough of this. To know me is to love me. How could you not? Do you feel that way? Yeah, that's too quiet. Why don't we celebrate this? In all of the universe, there's only one you. One you. My blessed brother Isaac and I were talking this morning. I love this guy. About how awesome it is that he has been brought to us. And we had this vision of Jeremiah chapter 1, thousands and thousands of years ago. The Trinity looked at each other and said, Whitey's going to need some Latin blood to loosen up. Right? And Isaac's got a story there too. It takes courage to live your life. If you actually believe that God gets, see, I can't say wiggly butt because the kids are here. So, God gets really excited when he looks at you and looks at you and listens to you and wonders how you see things. What parent present here doesn't delight in the thought process of watching your child grow up and get full of life, love living their life, love exploring, love being curious, love trying new things, getting after things that are a lot bigger than you are, getting after things that are bigger than your belief in what you can do? What child or what parent would ever back away from that? Instead, we as parents would delight, dude, that's courageous. Which Which, by the way, if there's anything you can give to your kids, give them that spirit. My youngest daughter, Lindsay's here. Or she was. She was. She's in the back playing. And one of my favorite memories of Lindsay, back then her name was Sparky, until she decided to get married to Nick, who thought that sounded way too much like a dog, and he couldn't picture himself marrying a dog. However, Cade, when he got himself a stuffed little puppy, the first thing he decided to name the dog was Sparky. So I looked at the dude and said, I don't remember how young Lindsay was, but there was this log going across this spring creek, and it was going pretty good. And it was about 7 or 8 feet down there. So this is something that fathers do with the children when the mothers aren't present, right? We're going to cross that log, because she wanted to cross that log. And so part of it is, okay, how do you master this? Parenting is much more like the game of curling than football. Good parenting is creating opportunities in front of the kids to allow the kids to explore, to investigate, to be a part of. You need to be the solid object, we as parents. We need to be able to look at our kids without any agendas at all and go, God, you're in this little person. What am I seeing? Because if they're going to find their X, their meaning, their purpose, their calling in life, we've got to create spaces for this to be reflected back to them. And by the way, if you haven't come to grips with your calling, your X, it's tough for the kids to feel that. Because they'll feel your apprehension in living life. They'll pull back. More life has been taken from the kids by the unlived lives we as adults have lived than by a parent who's made a ton of mistakes. Making mistakes with kids does not mess them up. You can make a bazillion mistakes with your kids and not mess them up. What will mess them up is this. When you hurt them, wound them, misunderstand them, you don't allow them to talk. You don't allow them to have their sense of self. You don't allow them to have a voice. And I think I've shared with you that there was a point where Lindsay was frustrated with me. And she called me a dork. And I paused. And I said, I just have one question. Do you know this is a whale's appendage? And she said, yes. And that bothered me a little bit. Next slide. It's impossible to find yourself, your sense of self, from the tree of the knowledge of I know. The tree of the knowledge of I know is oppressive. And listen to me. I think in the name of Christ, we as well-intended brothers and sisters have killed and aborted more souls from the kingdom than any doctor ever has. We've got to observe this. The most dangerous person on the face of this earth is a Christian who only feeds from this tree that I know. Because you will do nothing but kill. When God said, don't eat from this tree because it will produce death, he wasn't kidding. When we understand that the law produces death, that's not an illusion. But do you picture in glory? Wow. When the Father looks at the Son and says, boy, are you ready? And Jesus smiles at his Father and says, I am. And he stands and he divests himself of any right, any privilege, any nobility, all that he had as a Son of God. He sets that aside, Philippians 2. He lowered himself as low as he can go. And that one man walks out. The beauty of the law. It's as he said, the law is not bad, it's good. None of us could ever hope to do anything but kill with it. What does Jesus do? He, for the joy set before him, for the joy, what joy? I did, and I'm going to bring him home to you. I did. I'm going to extend life to my brothers and sisters. For the joy set before him endures the cross and despises shame. Earlier, the writer of Hebrews says, you're stuck on milk and you're not getting a solid food. Why? You don't want to live in innocence. You won't receive the word of righteousness. Do you understand that when you look in the mirror and you call yourself an idiot, a toad, or whatever, any disparaging name, do you understand that when you look at your shortcomings and you beat yourself up, that is an absolute posture of arrogance? Bottom line. You are saying to the almighty, all-wise individual, I'm smarter than you. I know this about me, and you're not reading the same script. When you beat yourself up the next time, I want you to say this to yourself. How dare you? How dare you? The sacrifice of our brother Jesus? And you're saying it's not enough? You choose to believe the broken shards and tattered ruins of your life rather than a God who says in Romans, there where he's saying, we scream. What he's saying is, you've never been able to say this before. I don't want you to know that I'm your father. I don't want you to whisper, Abba. I want you to scream it to the cosmos. When God created everything, in the entire universe, there was one little thing he asked us not to do. One. I don't know how vast the universe is, but I know one is one. He said, don't eat of this tree. This tree, the tree of life. Let's go to the next slide. Eat freely from. It is the I am tree. It is a father who says, try to consume me up if you can. It is the God who says, I don't want you to be dependent on me. I'm not a father who wants a call from a 40-year-old saying, well, Dad, I'm looking at a blue shirt and a red shirt. Which do you think I should buy? He's a God that gets a call from a 40-year-old saying, I have no idea whether I can do this, but I just know it's in my heart and my head and it makes sense. And I think I'm going to go for it. He's a God who then, when you fail, he's not going to look at your failure. He's going to put his arm around you and go, that took a lot of courage. A lot of courage. And I'm really, really proud of you. Why? Because living in courage is far more important than living in success. Success is overrated. How long does that last for you when you succeed? You hit the ball out of the park. How long is that good for you? On the other hand, if your character is being shaped with a deep belief in the very nature and the countenance of a God, that's Jesus parks himself right on the end of your nose, brothers and sisters, and when you blow it, he simply goes, boom, begin again, begin again. You can't outdo God. But when we start munching from the I know tree, your God is a very oppressive, dark God. He's mean-spirited, isn't he? He's the God that you never measure up to. He's the God that you hide from. He's the God that when I hid in the garden because of my shame, I now project upon God, I got to hide from you because you're really dark and ugly then too. Rather than, no, just a second. He's the God that never shamed me in the garden. He's the God that thousands of years later would extend his only son, his only child, to each and every one of us, even if we're the only one. He's the God that says, begin again, begin again, begin again. He's the God that said there is only one you in the universe, and the universe does not need you fitting in. The universe, your culture, your community needs you breathing out who you are. I don't care whether it makes sense to other people. If it's in your gut and it's burning, it's like, I don't know why this makes sense, but it does make sense. Breathe it out. Now, I can tell you when I was in second grade, first grade, right in there, I had this experience where his teacher said, okay, what game should we play? And I blurted out, hide and go seek. And Corey, a friend of mine, said, Jeff, that's a dumb game. What did I feel at that moment? Any of you guys ever felt that? Say anything, made a contribution, someone says that's not cool, and you back up. So the following week when the teacher asked for suggestions on games, do you think that I was motivated to make any contribution? This is where courage comes in. Whose rebellious child is it? Takes after her grandmother, obviously. Parents, we have to encourage our children that they've got to learn to not fit in. Because if I'm trying to fit in with Bob, then I figure out what Bob likes, and I identify with that, hoping that Bob then is going to accept me, bless me, like me. But you see all the power I just gave to Bob? See, that's not loving me, and it's not loving Bob, because I'm asking Bob to assume responsibility for things that are my responsibility. And in addition to that, I'm also manipulating Bob, right? Because if Bob doesn't give me what I want to fit in, I'm going to start to position him some way, shape, or form to try to extract that. That is the basis of discontent, fitting in, belonging. David Needham wrote this book, Birthright, many years ago. Hardwired in the core of who we are. Your birthright is for love and belonging. That's what this is about. The human brain cannot develop its capacity without being meaningfully connected to people that love us and care about us. The brain, by God's design, is an image, is a reference to the Trinity. We're designed to be connected. Brooklyn, our little teeny infant grandchild there, it's amazing to look into her eyes and to watch her begin to track. But I'll tell you something I've seen in every one of my grandkids, is when I look into these infant eyes and I pray over them. I've seen in all of them, their eyes open wide. There's something going on there. Do we pray over our kids in that way? Not, I hope they become doctors. Don't give them standards like that. Give them the spirit of exploration, if you would. Next slide. Let's flash right through the next one there, too. There we go. The place that God calls you to is where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. Frederick Buechner. If you're bored and you need someone to read this guy. He's a half a bubble off plum. I love him. But he gets it. He gets it. He also wrote this book called Telling Secrets. I may have mentioned this in the past, but Buechner was playing with his brother in the toy room. His dad came down the hall and opened up the door, and leaned in, talked to him a little bit, and said, you boys be good. And then closed the door, went up in the garage, and fired up the car, and expired. They were never allowed to talk. They weren't allowed to go to the memorial service or the funeral service. And this stuff just starts backing up because it's a part of his story. There are parts in your story that you have to have permission to tell, or you will never get to an authentic sense of self. You have the responsibility to figure out who the safe people in this world are. How do you figure that out? You trust someone with something that has value to you. What do they do with it? Are they a good caretaker, or do they violate you? If they violate you, they're not safe. What does that mean? Now you have a responsibility to establish a really healthy boundary, which is the most loving thing that you can do for yourself, and it's the most loving thing that you can do for that other individual, because it invites them then to figure out, why is this boundary here? It's absolutely essential. If indeed then we develop the skill of setting boundaries, then we choose with deep abandonment to live in vulnerability with one another. We must. It's the only way to really find this deep significance of what's my X. You've got to have joy and you've got to have delight in being who you are. And then you have to live in a state of vulnerability where people have the ability to speak into your lives. You're going to do. That's sort of a compromising goal. Set it higher. The things that my wings butt and I do for one another is, the thing that we're hardest on is, that's not a big enough goal. And it's not about ego-aggrandizement. It's about, are you living your life? Next slide. Thank you. Live authentically. What I mean by this is stop qualifying yourself. How often, when you share something about yourself, you find yourself kind of backing up and qualifying and packaging and trying to figure out how do I serve it up so it's acceptable to you? Stop it. Stop it. As believers in particular, you should never again qualify yourself to another human being because Christ has qualified us to the Father for all of eternity. If you're going to get to the joy of being alive and living your life, you have to wrestle with this. Number 2, be who he is, because if he is who he ain't who he is. That one I think works. Next slide. Identify core competencies. What I mean by this is this. What do people affirm you for? Wow, that white chocolate chip cookie thing that you make is amazing. Well, it can't be about cookies, can it? Maybe it is. We need to listen to where there's this bloom, this energy of wow. Not, I like how you do, boom. Feel for the life of the affirmation. Try something this year that you don't think that you'd ever do. Design a suit. Raise a rabbit. Write some haikus. Take up a language. I don't care what it is. If you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. Figure it out. You want to feel alive, you want to feel full, you want to find the purpose, you've got to be taking risks. Comfort kills. Gotta get it. We like it, we like the thought of it, but we regress so quickly. When you're going through life, identify needs that are constantly catching your attention. What is it that you're drawn to? And then seek to show up in that space and assess, okay, when I was working with that, how did that feel? I was in a soup kitchen. What did that feel like? I hated it. Next guy said, I love it. My son-in-law, Nick, is the most amazing guy. He has a phenomenal ministry to homeless people. And I gotta tell you, at one point, I kind of thought they were the creepy people. And then I met a guy by the name of John outside Starbucks in Castro Valley one Christmas. And the dude's all hopped up, standing there waiting for a handout. And I walked in, and I was getting my cup of coffee in Danish. And the Lord said, "Put that to John for me." I said, "John, very Klippenes. That's my last name." And I gave it to him. He looked up, and his eyes focused. It wasn't me. I literally believed he saw Christ in me. God asked me to do a simple little thing, and he had an opportunity to touch. And Nick does this day in and day out, and Kate goes with him. It's 5. And Kate's like this phenomenal little intuitive sniff test guy. He knows which dudes aren't safe. He knows the dudes that are safe. Nick, a number of years ago, started tuning up bikes for these homeless guys. And this one homeless dude, you know when love is real, it impacts people. And Nick had tuned his bike up a couple different times. The guy came up and said, "Nick, I can't pay you, I don't have any money, but I want to give you something." He reached in his pocket and extended to Nick this big old crack cocaine chunk. And Nick said, "Dude, I know how special that is. You want you to keep that." But you saw the love in that, right? You knew the transaction, what was going on. Because he knows their names. And if they won't give him their name, the name tells a story. Your name tells a story. It's a simple little thing, a day in and day out, seeking to add value anywhere we can to the lives we come across, and feeling for the bloom, if you would, of what's this actually like for us. We've got, next slide, we've got to get rid of I can't. Never again say I can't. It's got to stop. I don't know yet, but I'll figure this out. You see, that path is the tree of life. But when I say I can't, I'm stuck, I'm done. And now we feel like a victim, and now we get moody, and now we want to make the whole world responsible for me being stuck. Doesn't work that way. We've got to blow up passivity. We've got to get rid of procrastination. If you know what to do and you don't do it, I don't know how you talk to yourself to get yourself to do it. Take that next step. No room for passivity. No room for procrastination if you want to find your X. And finally, mentor, 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 mentor. If there was a cultural thing that I could do, every human being would have a mentor 10 to 15 years older, and then have someone you're mentoring 5 to 10 years younger. Who you're mentoring that's younger is going to push the vitality of being younger to you. Who's older than you will push the wisdom to you. And this chain is an amazing chain. And it can start young. It can start as a child. I mean, you don't think children can't give gifts to one another? They absolutely can. If you don't have a mentor in your life, if you're not mentoring, pouring in, and adding value to others, think about putting this chain in place. Let's pray. My blessed Father, I could only well imagine if we begin to believe you, that you've given us life to be lived with abundance, with abandonment, with love and compassion, with reckless abandonment at times. What would our culture look like? What would our lives look like? How much depression and despair would go on? How much would we turn away from the things of greed and financial lust that we have? You have brothers and sisters and children here. I pray that you would send the Holy Spirit upon them, and you would invigorate, stir up, and cause this hunger to bring Christ's name.